Thank you to my patrons and members for supporting the channel. How far would you go to make the person you love happy? It's the small things that count, those little acts of service we do every day, like cooking dinner, tackling some household chores, getting around to painting the spare room, buying flowers, raising your son from birth to be the strongest martial artist in the world, pumping thousands of pounds into their training and development and specialist equipment, all in the aim of providing your lover with an opponent worthy of carrying their genes that they can enjoy beating into a bloody pulp when they turn 13. But we've all been there, right? Right? Emi Akezawa, or as I like to call her, Mother of the Year, is a wealthy socialite with a love for violence, decadence, and Yujiro Hanma. Maybe not in that order. She's also Baki's mum, if you didn't already know, and she's also dead. But despite Emi's limited appearances in grappler Baki, her legacy in the series is palpable, which we'll get into right after you like, subscribe, hype, and all that stuff. Had to squeeze it in somewhere. In 19-something, Emi married into the Akezawa family in a lavish ceremony that would ensure that for the remainder of her life, she would want for nothing. Her new husband, Eiichi Akezawa, was a prominent figure in international society, and it's said that the future of the economy rides on his shoulders. He's a big deal, basically. At the celebration of their wedding, Emi catches the eye of a young and sort of fancy-looking Yujiro Hanma, who, with the intensity of his gaze alone, makes Emi believe that she's been violently undressed. I'm gonna have to do a lot of blurring whenever Emi's involved. Having made a public showing of her desire to and from this strange man, Eiichi strikes her publicly in front of all their friends and family before dismissing her. Eiichi then approached Yujiro, mocking and ridiculing him for his appearance and dress sense as he starts to shower him in food and drink. An uncharacteristically calm Yujiro takes this assault, and as Emi returns to ask her husband to stop, Yujiro grabs her and forcibly kisses her in front of everyone around. Essentially having marked Emi as his quarry, Yujiro steps into a boxing ring. Oh yeah, there was a boxing versus jiu-jitsu fight in the middle of this party for some reason. I don't know, rich people shit. A jiu-jitsu practitioner challenges Yujiro to a fight in order to avenge Eiichi and his honor for some reason. And during the entirety of his monologue, Yujiro maintains eye contact with Emi in the crowd, much to the frustration of his opponent, and especially Eiichi. Once Yujiro uses his signature axe kick to defeat his opponent instantly, he returns to staring at a now clearly smitten and equally intimidated Emi. Yujiro has clearly become fascinated with Emi. Why? Well, he explains later that night after breaking into Eiichi and Emi's room and murdering Eiichi. Yujiro tells Emi that he knows what she wants and what she has always wanted deep down, and that was to be as close as possible as she could to violence. She loves blood. Specifically, she loves to see violence occur, and Yujiro had basically sensed a kindred spirit in her upon first glance. The undressing that Yujiro did on Emi when he saw her wasn't just a sexual one. He was revealing her true nature, thereby undressing her. She's his equal in female form, sort of. Yujiro has the power to assert his will and dominance over others through physical force, and now Emi, having married into money, has by default gained the economic ability to force people to do what she wants. After Emi has revealed her true self, she weeps with joy and embraces Yujiro, who embraces her back and declares that she will be the mother of his son. Now, there are two ways to look at this. Number one, Emi and Yujiro are kindred spirits with the same drives, desires, and sadistic tendencies, making them a perfect fit for each other. Let's call it a match made in heaven. Or two, Yujiro in that moment saw a vulnerable woman with some sort of disposition that meant that she enjoyed blood sports, who he manipulated into developing an aggressive form of compulsion to please him by any means necessary, including raising and abusing her own child so that he could be a good fighter for him later down the line. I will admit that one of these is far simpler than the other. But I have to ask you now, the audience, is Emi a victim? And also, despite me seeing Emi as a victim personally, it does not excuse her crimes and the abhorrent way she treated her son Baki. I'm not excusing anything here when I say I think she might be a victim. Also, I hate to use like future events written years later to justify anything in media. I really hate when people assume that authors and artists plan that far in advance. Like, you know, whenever we see Nika and it looks like Luffy and Skypiea, I'm not a fan of that. But we do know that Yujiro is able to assess people to the point that he can diagnose cancer. So how much of a stretch is it that he can spot the mentally vulnerable and unstable? Again, I really want to stress that I'm not excusing anything that Emi will go on to do for the remainder of her time in the series. So yeah, Why don't we talk about that now? In chapter 78, we get our first partial reveal of Emi. She cuts an imposing figure sitting on a lavish throne in a mansion house being waited on by a shirtless man surrounded by pure opulence. This precedes a phone call she has received in which she had been informed that Baki will be training himself from now on after having lost in a fight against 100 delinquents. If you want to know more about that, you can check out my Yasha 8 video somewhere here. I spoke a lot about this. I just love the childhood arc, man. It's just so good. It's just peak Baki. As Baki is going around fighting local martial artists and testing himself, a mysterious figure working on behalf of the Akezawa group has been going around asking Yakuza members who their strongest brawler is so they might be hired to fight Baki. Mr. Kuriyagawa is of course acting on behalf of his boss, Emi, who's keen to provide her son Baki with strong opponents to fight. As she tells Kuriyagawa over the phone, she considers Baki to be an A-class total fighter, an elite thoroughbred with the blood of Yujiro Hama, which yes, is an insane way to talk about your own son. Emi completely views Baki as some kind of product that she's got to cultivate and nurture, not in a familial way, but to become stronger and more powerful. Her devotion to Yujiro and his need to produce a strong child to fight has overpowered any maternal instincts that she may have carried. I mean, I don't even want to assume that she has them in the first place. What's worse is the delusion she has in believing that what she's doing is out of a mother's love for her son. As she says, and I know this is the Kodansha translation, but I've chosen to go with official translations where I can. A parent who sends their own child to fight a Yakuza. That is the level of love you need to have when you're a mother. Crazy stuff. Now let's also look at Emi and see how she views herself. You can gather from the fact that we get to see her clothed, and she has a mirror the size of, well, it's the biggest mirror you'll ever see. I've got no frame of reference. That she's incredibly vain and thoroughly narcissistic. Compare this to the Emi at 19 who was married to Eiichi, and they are basically two different people. And I would say that this is the direct result of Emi effectively deifying Yujiro. To Emi, Yujiro is the ultimate man, and being the mother of his child makes her, by default, the ultimate woman. Therefore, she's likely to spend a lot of her time surrounded by buff, topless men whilst also hanging around the house naked, observing herself all the time. Comes with the territory. I mean, think about when Yujiro's alone. That guy's just always in his Speedos. Upon hearing that Baki is lost in a fight against the world champion boxer Yuri, Emi makes the journey to Baki's home, which we know to be quite a humble place, especially in comparison to Emi's home. Baki is clearly shocked to see her, but he's also not exactly excited nor happy. She immediately gets down to business and offers to bring him more world-class coaches, to which Baki refuses and actually thanks her for giving him a place to live and money to buy food. Which, you know, are two things that a literal child shouldn't have to thank their parents for. Baki even says that this is more than enough for him. He gets the bare minimum from his mother and he's thankful for it. This is devastating. He doesn't expect anything more than this from her, and it's honestly heartbreaking. After he says this, Emi gives him a long and uncomfortable kiss on the lips before walking away and telling him to get stronger than his father. Now, am I about to imply that there is some sort of incestuous thing going on here from Emi? I don't know. What I can tell you is that this is inappropriate as hell. Emi caps this off by saying the kindest thing she has probably ever told Baki, which is that if he ever needs anything, to let her know. Baki beams in happiness from this and then gets ready to travel to see Undo and fight the Yasha ape. All of that stuff you can watch on my Yasha ape video. Upon returning home from this adventure, Baki goes to Emi's home where he's warmly welcomed and immediately sized up and down and analyzed. Emi knows about his fight with the Yasha ape and shows Baki a taping of Yuri's most recent fight. As Baki reveals that the fight he's watching is basically in slow motion to him, Emi gets increasingly excited and demands that the two fight immediately and to cancel the fight with Hanayama. Unfortunately for Yuri, Hanayama knows that he is the barrier between a fight between Baki and himself. So on the night of his big fight, Hanayama takes Yuri down in brutal fashion, effectively retiring him from professional fighting forever. In what is clearly a message to Baki, Hanayama has made his first move, to which Emi tries to goad Baki, saying that his father would be trembling with excitement if this were him, and does Baki maybe feel like chickening out? To which Baki stands, leaves, and gets ready to fight his new challenger. After a very long battle between Baki and Hanayama that is interrupted by Yujiro, who breaks all of Hanayama's limbs just to prove a point, we cut back to Emi alone in her mansion, staring at a photo of Yujiro. Emi licks the photograph in its frame, further showing just how madly obsessed she is with the ogre, when she becomes aware that a scowling Yujiro is watching her from across the room. And let's be clear, he's not scowling because he's grossed out by her behavior just now. He's mad as hell because after he's interrupted Baki's fight, he comes to the realization that his son is weak by his standards. And who's to blame? The woman he left in charge of raising his son. Emi greets Yujiro with an impressive looking combination of kicks and strikes, which he doesn't react to in the slightest, which is clearly a turn on for Emi as she then embraces and kisses an unfazed Yujiro, proclaiming him to be her beloved. In an equally abusive fashion, Yujiro yanks Emi by the hair, tells her that she's failed him, and throws her across the room into a cabinet. Yujiro mocks her for how she's trained Baki over the years and says that he'll take things over now. To this, Emi picks up a razor and goes to slash Yujiro's turned back, but she's disarmed, and an impressed Yujiro gives her a kiss and says that maybe she's worthwhile after all. Emi gets what she's always after, Yujiro's praise, and at this, she begins to weep again with happiness. Okay, now, again, we have two ways to look at this encounter. Number one, at being rejected by Yujiro, Emi's narcissism can't handle this, so she goes to attack the person whose approval she seeks the most in the world. Remember, everything she does is to please Yujiro. Or, number two, at being told that he was going to take her son away, is it possible that Emi's maternal instincts drove her to take up arms against a man threatening to separate her from her son? Maybe? Honestly, I think it's the first thing, but hey, it could be a combination of the two. After this and the flashback to how Yujiro and Emi met, Baki has just finished recounting his and Hanayama's fight to his mum, to which she laughs uncontrollably at how Yujiro knocked out Baki and broke every bone in Hanayama's body. She's a lovely lady. But in this chapter 129, we see something quite interesting happen. As Emi is telling Baki that he needs to be striving to be as ruthless and brutal as Yujiro, as that's the only way he can be defeated, Baki actually stands up for himself. He recounts that the fight between the two of them was a seriously grisly battle, but as a result, he now feels a genuine bond with Hanayama. Similarly, he has that same bond now with Yuri and the Yasha ape. In Baki's own words, the true answer to my quest to be the strongest lies within those bonds. And that means my path is not the same as Dad's. At these words, Emi is fully taken aback. The resoluteness Baki shows in this moment is enough to make his own mother appear to question what strength really means, and it sways her enough to share the fact that Hanayama had written to Baki from the hospital, which does make it look like that up until this moment, she was going to keep this letter hidden from him. And as Baki has claimed that it's his bond with people that makes him strong, she helps him in this development by allowing him to go and see Hanayama. She really will do anything to make her son stronger. And what could have been a great emotional moment for the two was again just another opportunity for Emi to manipulate Baki. But that's okay. Baki now has an older brother figure in Hanayama for life, so who really wins at the end of the day? To prove his point about his bonds making him stronger, Hanayama claims that he can never brawl again, and it's up to Baki to get strong enough to defeat his father. I don't know why Hanayama is lying like this, but okay. Like, as soon as we see Hanayama again, he's squishing a guy into paste on the floor. And he's not stopped fighting since. The fuck? In fact, when Baki is technically dead at the hands of Gaia, it's the bonds he shares with Yuri, the Yasha ape, and Hanayama that effectively brings him back to life. So yeah, bonds are real. After the Gaia fight, Emi and Stridham are talking about Yujiro's latest intimidation attempt on the Prime Minister of Japan, when Emi mentions that there's only 1 week left until Yujiro and Baki's fight. When Stridham, who's fully aware of Yujiro's ruthlessness, challenges her on how she could be so callous as to allow this to go ahead, she proclaims that Yujiro is the best man on earth, and that any woman would do whatever he desires. She even goes so far as to denounce her own bond with her son, which is somewhat ironic, because the bond she put so much stock in between herself and Yujiro is also looked down upon and denounced by Yujiro almost immediately after this encounter. Yujiro states in no uncertain terms that Emi is free to desire and lust for him all she wants, but he regards her as nothing more than breeding stock. There's no emotional tie there. She is simply the vessel that brought his son into the world. For Emi, this is devastating. Yujiro entered her life, murdered her husband, and for years manipulated her into believing that she and him were one and the same. And even if he didn't say that explicitly, he certainly did nothing to dissuade her from coming to these conclusions herself. Emi's entire self-worth and identity revolves around Yujiro, and here he is rejecting her utterly and completely. Emi, with her world now rocked, stumbles around in public before bumping into Baki and uncharacteristically bears all of her emotions to her son. She grabs on to the thing most similar to the man she loves, Baki, and berates and beats him for being the reason that Yujiro doesn't love her, calling her son weak. And Baki just stands there, taking punch after punch until he asks her one simple heartbreaking question. If I beat that man, will you love me? Oh, it's actually quite sad, man. Baki takes on all of Emi's frustrations and rage, blames himself for being weak, and admits to being the reason that she's sad. Emi is either too angry in this moment, or perhaps it's because she's been confronted with her failures as a mother and, frankly, as a human being, that she once again lashes out, gets caught and hugged by her son, who she bites and then flees, vowing not to lose against Yujiro. To be honest, this is going to be only the second most heartbreaking thing to happen between Baki and his mother, with the most heartbreaking yet to come. But I really love and hate this scene so much. It's clear to us, the audience, that Baki is drowning in this moment, reaching out for just a small fraction of the love that he has been denied his entire life from a mother who's come too far at this point to suddenly shift her worldview and acknowledge her son as anything more than a tool. But her worldview has shifted. In a revealing moment shared with Kuriyagawa, Emi admits that Baki will almost certainly be killed by Yujiro during their fight. It's a matter-of-fact statement with a hint of snark that Emi is using to cover up her conflicted feelings. Conflicted feelings that surface when Kuriyagawa mentions that Baki is doing this for her. Emi screams at Kuriyagawa to shut up, but she can't help but reflect on the moment when Baki held her and how that reminded her of how she would nurse him as a baby. As maternal feelings start to rise, the Emi we know refuses to entertain those thoughts and overcompensates by again denying any mother-son bond with Baki and dedicating her life again to making Yujiro happy. Which I would argue, she feels like now she has no choice but to do this. If she truly allows herself to feel the weight of everything she has done wrong in raising her son, I'm sure what mental fragility that is left within Emi would shatter. She's in a self-preservation mode. She's in too deep, or any number of phrases that would perfectly frame this state of mind right now. Now here is, I suppose, the most important bit of this video. I'm going to cover the Baki versus Yujiro fight solely from the perspective of Emi, as that's what the video is about. But I'm sure somewhere down the line I'll cover how this is maybe a better fight than their second one. But for now, let's move on. At the beginning of the fight, after Yujiro punched an earthquake, Emi can be seen with a look of fear on her face as her son gets ready to charge the ogre, and dare I say, this is the first look of concern regarding Baki that we've seen from her. As Baki gets Yujiro in a rear naked chokehold, Emi remarks that it almost looks like a father giving his son a piggyback ride, which you and I both know loops all the way to the far future when that indeed does happen purposefully in their second battle. Baki is just full of callbacks throughout the series. I love it. At the sight of this, Emi realizes that she isn't sure what she wants anymore from this fight. Does she want Yujiro to win? Or for Baki to win? Or is it something else? With all three finally together and with emotions high, is it possible that the third thing Emi wants is to just have her family all together? Yujiro at this point addresses the onlookers and Emi directly and thanks them all for having raised his son and helping him reach this extraordinary level of strength. Emi appears relieved at this, albeit conflicted, as Yujiro indicates that he's about ready to go all out and finish this fight. Emi tells herself in that moment that she has to smile, but what we in fact get is this grotesque and twisted approximation of some kind of expression or combination of, as she demands that Baki makes his father happy now. Baki, and therefore Emi, has made Yujiro the happiest he's ever been. She's accomplished what she set out to do 13 years ago. This is the culmination of over a decade's work, and Emi does not know how to feel. She senses the impending death of her son, and she's weeping both out of joy and at a new sadness at what she believes she's about to lose. She's never valued Baki as anything more than a commodity, and her twisted face mirrors her equally twisted emotional state. Much to everyone's horror and Emi's numbness, Yujiro begins to finish off Baki by repeatedly punching him in the head whilst he's splayed out on the ground. Emi watches on, noting that this is Yujiro's nature and he'll show no mercy to anyone. He's so fixated and happy in this moment that it means that she has won. She's created a warrior capable of appeasing Yujiro, but now that she's won, it's time for the game to stop. Emi, with the blood of her son splattered on her face, allows herself to feel and act in a motherly way for the first time since Baki was a baby. She steps into the fight, loudly declaring that she'll take on Yujiro now instead. Emi breaks both her wrists on Yujiro, who had previously indulged her in her sporadic flirtatious violence, and remarks that she's clearly abandoned her womanhood for motherhood. After a kick to the groin and a spit in his face, Yujiro loses patience, rupturing Emi's ears and no doubt causing severe internal damage. Just like in his future fight against Doppo. Everything loops around, I swear to God. Emi defies Yujiro one more time, embracing and sinking her teeth into his neck. Yujiro compliments her, before embracing her, breaking her back, and finally crushing her to death. You see how it loops around? They started off with a hug and it ends with a hug. Emi, in agony during these moments, smiles. She's being embraced back by Yujiro, yes, but she's also standing up to him on behalf of Baki for the first time ever. After Yujiro leaves, we discover that Emi is in fact still alive. Barely clinging on, she holds her son in her arms. The tragedy being that Baki isn't even conscious to enjoy this one single moment. Baki carries Emi through the city on his back. It's a tender moment, with both of them making remarks about how close they are as a mother and son, as a crowd looks on in horror. The devastating truth, however, is that Baki is carrying the corpse of his mother through the streets, their familiar interaction being entirely a hallucination. And Baki knows he's hallucinating in this moment, as when he's stopped by police, he begs them to allow him to have this moment for just a little longer. After a police chase, some children find Emi's body in the long grass, delicately and lovingly adorned with wildflowers. So, after all this, I want to go back to my original question. Is Emi a victim? Seriously, this is a question to you. Seriously, you and me, it's you and me, you. Because I find myself leaning towards, yes, she is, but I'm afraid that by claiming that she's a victim of Yujiro's manipulation, I'm undercutting her own autonomy and decision-making. And it could look like I'm saying that nothing she did is her fault. Because that's not true. It is her fault. And it took Yujiro nearly beating Baki to death for Emi to finally do something right. The way I see it is Yujiro took advantage of a vulnerable woman who was already in an established abusive relationship. He quite literally blew into her life, killed her abusive husband, and said, "You're the one I've been searching for, you will have my child." Then he allowed Emi to build this narrative that Yujiro is the ultimate man, therefore by choosing her, she must be the ultimate woman. Emi's single-focused obsession and love, because I'm not convinced that it is, for Yujiro is what allowed her to cast aside any feelings of maternal love towards Baki, who would grow up not knowing the love of either a father or mother, despite the fact that we're both pretty active in raising him. Albeit, again, raising him to be a weapon that Yujiro had the desire to destroy. It's maybe the worst family dynamic in ever? I don't know. I guess the answer is, it's complicated. Do I think Emi is a bad person? Yeah, pretty much. I think she had the darkness inside her, and Yujiro helped her draw it out. But I think one of the saddest things about this is that Baki, up until the second father-son battle, still holds Emi in quite high regard. After meeting Kurogao all those years later, Baki truly believes that his mother loved him because she interfered and challenged Yujiro to a fight, which everyone knows is tantamount to signing off on your own execution. Why would she do this other than the fact that she loved Baki and wanted to protect him? After Emi's death, Baki tells his uncle in the Akezawa group that he's off to train and he'll be back in 2 years. Whilst abroad in Brazil, he learns about the underground arena back home in Japan, auditions for a slot in the fighting lineup, and the rest, as you know it, is history. I think for newer fans of Baki who may not be too familiar with the original manga or anime can perhaps overlook how important Baki's upbringing and Emi's influence on him was. So if you picked up Baki from watching the Netflix show, like I did, by the way, then I implore you to check out the earliest work. Personally, I still think the art and fights in early Baki are some of the best in the whole series, and I'll die on this hill. God damn it. Anyway, you probably heard enough from me, and I'm tired of talking. So I will catch you in the next one. Say hi to your grandparents from me, and peace. Can't believe I managed to make a Baki video about a character who doesn't actually have a fight in the entire series. What?